Hey listeners, quick question. Are you tired of overpaying for your mobile plan? I've got the answer. Ting Mobile. Ting Mobile is all about flexibility and savings. You only pay for what you use, no crazy fees or overages. It's perfect for those who want control over their phone bill without sacrificing quality. Say goodbye to bloated phone bills. Go to krmpods.com/ting. Ting Mobile. Mobile that makes sense.
You're listening to Fox Cities Murder Mayhem, your bi-weekly dose of true crime history in a small rural community of Wisconsin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fox Cities Murder Mayhem. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
Gavin, we're back again.
Yeah.
Where are we off to traveling to?
We are going to go to a small town called Kaukauna.
Nice. Everybody loves the Kaukauna story.
Yeah.
We almost should rename this podcast the Kaukauna Podcast and some other stuff.
I could make it an entirely Kaukauna podcast without any difficulty.
Which is weird. There should not be that many killings in Kaukauna.
Well, it wouldn't all be killings, but
I mean, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So this is I'm really excited for this one. Okay. Let me tell you, right off the bat, super excited. It's going to end kind of abruptly, so...
It is only a page and a half for everybody.
So for those who like their nice, great endings, this is not going to be one of those. But I think the story itself is pretty great. So...
All right.
Yeah. It's the morning of September 14th, 1972. It's 11:06 a.m. Owner Mrs. Anna Diedrich called police to check on guests at the Kaukauna Motel on Route 4, which is Highway 00 or Highland Avenue if you live in Kaukauna. They were supposed to have checked out the day before, but they had not been answering knocks at the door. Lieutenant Dean Ball discovered a woman dead in the room. Another woman in the room was in critical condition and brought to Kaukauna Community Hospital. She had her throat slit roughly 5 inches across, lost a great deal of blood and required surgery. 2 razor blades were found in the bathroom, with a blood trail running from there to where the woman was in the bedroom. On the first day, the police would not identify the women other than to say that they were from Green Bay. A large number of books and magazines open to pages referring to suicide were found strewn about the room. That is in a news article, and I did not see that in any other source. So that might be an embellishment, but that is how it was reported. Police immediately suspected a suicide pact rather than a double homicide, but processed the room fully, taking many photos. Early verification of their identities was slow because neither woman had ID on them. The presumption of their residence was based on the registration of the 1967 Chevrolet sedan they had been driving. The registration was in the name of both women. Certain papers in the room also suggested the women had been in other places in Wisconsin and Indiana over the last few months. The dead woman was autopsied at the Appleton Memorial Hospital. By late the next day, the injured woman was upgraded to fair condition, and she was identified as Camille Quinn, age 32. Interestingly, visual identification came from Sybil Mullen, a secretary of Dr. Weisler in Appleton. Lieutenant Ball had found paperwork connecting the women to Dr. Weisler, and sought him out. Mullen said that both women had been patients of Weisler's and were undergoing psychotherapy. Both would frequently write the doctor letters talking about the other woman, and the tone was usually quite desperate. They often tried to get the doctor to prescribe more medication for them, but he felt it had gone too far, and he started to put tight controls on this. Reverend William Elkuin, a priest in St. Anthony's Retreat Center in Marathon, Wisconsin, was also brought to Kaukauna to identify Quinn. I mean, by the time she's up and talking, she can identify herself, but they kind of wanted to get people to...
Do you have any connection of why somebody from Marathon, Wisconsin would know? Because isn't that up by Wausau?
Yeah.
Why would that person have known her if she was from Green Bay?
They had a source that said that Elkuin was Camille Quinn's brother, and I don't think this was accurate, and I think that they misunderstood.
Okay.
Because Reverend Elquin was a priest, and I think in this sense, like brother was like a religious term.
Oh.
But they had heard that he was her brother, and thought, oh, we'll get him to identify. And he comes, and he knew who she was.
Okay.
But he's like, oh yeah, that's. So I think they misunderstood their relationship.
Gotcha.
Camille Quinn's adopted father, Earl Quinn of Hayworth, Illinois, and I do not know where Hayworth is, but was notified by Chief William Nagel, and he said that he would come as soon as possible. The dead woman was named as Sue Shutkowski, and I could be way off on that. That's a tough name. She was age 39. Deputy Coroner Thomas Verhagen, filling in for the vacationing Bernard Kemps, said a coroner's inquest could decide otherwise, but he did not see any signs of foul play. Shutkowski had been wearing pajamas and had no mark on her body. A deadly amount of Deperol and Doradin was in her system. These are basically like sleeping pills and tranquilizer type things.
Okay.
Quinn explained that the pair had been traveling frequently over the past year and were in Hebron, Illinois. Hebron, Illinois? I don't know. Sorry, people. Before coming to Kaukauna because they visited the dead woman's brother. Quinn said her companion had taken pills, and afterward, Quinn put a pillow over her head and sat on her stomach for the next 90 minutes to make sure she was dead. The two had formed a suicide pact so they could both be with God. Once Shutkowski was dead, Quinn took a rosary and put it in the dead woman's hand. Quinn left a note identifying relatives to contact and then swallowed tranquilizers herself and cut her own throat several times. She failed in her attempt, which led to District Attorney James Long charging Quinn with assisted suicide for the death of her friend. Long said that he would seek to get Quinn mental help in Oshkosh or Madison, noting that both women had undergone psychotherapy in the past, and it seemed clear that the suicide pact was instigated by mental distress rather than any criminal motive. Further investigation found that the two women had been nuns together. They had worked at St. Elizabeth Hospital in Appleton, but left their order 14 years ago. Shutkowski had a degree from Marian College in Fond du Lac, while Quinn appeared to only have a high school diploma from Hayworth High School. They remained friends and were hoping to get employment at Appleton Memorial Hospital. Their most recent address was in Green Bay at what was called the San Luis Apartments. I don't know if they're still called that, but the building is still there. It's at 1681 Deckner Avenue. If people know Green Bay, I do not.
I do not either.
On their job applications, they each listed each other as the next of kin. While Quinn was still recovering in the hospital, she was questioned by Deputy Coroner Tom Verhagen and District Attorney James Long. The entire interview took 31 minutes. Quinn appeared very unclear on what day it was or how long it had been since she checked into the Kaukauna Motel. She recalled applying for jobs, including at Appleton Memorial. She said that Sue did not join her because she was suffering from heart trouble. According to Quinn, Sue had no medication for this heart trouble because doctors did not believe her, but heart trouble ran in her family. Both her mother and father had died of it, and she could hardly handle to do any heavy work because of it. Quinn freely and matter-of-factly explained how she had suffocated her friend after the sleeping pills were taken and then failed to follow through with the razor blade. She said this was something they had discussed in the past and repeatedly told investigators again and again that they just wanted to be with God, and she was happy for Sue that she was now with God. She would not use the phrase that Sue was killed or that Sue committed suicide. She repeatedly would only use the phrase that Sue was now with God. Okay. That was the only way she would phrase it. Quinn was hesitant to talk about her past. When asked if Sue had tried to kill herself before, she refused to answer, saying that it did not matter now. Her phrasing strongly suggests to me that the answer was yes, but again, I guess she's right. It doesn't really matter now. Quinn was more willing to talk about how they met. She said that Sue had left her order in 1958 and was in St. Catherine's Hospital, I don't know where that is, for heart trouble, and Quinn worked at that hospital. They became fast friends, and Sue convinced Quinn to also leave her job as a nun as well. So they spent the next decade driving around the country together as ex-nuns looking for hospital jobs. When asked if they left a suicide note, Quinn said they left a note with Sue's brother's name, phone number, and address. No message, just who to contact. The coroner asked if Quinn left a note for herself, and she said no, because she would have asked for the same person. She said Sue's family knew her better and accepted her more than her own family. Quote, I was adopted and my parents were divorced, and one runs one end of the state to the other. Neither have anything to do with each other, or with me, nor with my sister, or anything. So Sue was really the only person I had. Now I say this ends abruptly because I actually found no evidence whatsoever that she was charged or brought to trial. She apparently was charged, because the paper would say that she was going to be charged, but it seems like they probably just dropped it and didn't carry through on it. And Quinn ends up living all the way up until 2022.
Wow, really?
Never does get married or have kids, and kind of, works on and off with hospitals and stuff. So this is very abrupt. So I had run across this story on accident going through the newspaper, and I thought it was interesting because it's two former nuns in a suicide pact, which that automatically catches my attention. But I was like, I need a little more here. So I put in a request for the police file, and they gave it to me. I was pleased that it still existed. I wasn't even sure if it would still be on file. It was. The police file is not super long because they so quickly figured out what had happened, and the interview was so brief that there isn't a whole lot of extra material there. I did already upload that to the Internet Archive. So if somebody wants to read the police report, I already put it online. You can check it out yourself. But yeah, it's kind of weird that I thought this was wow, this really grabbed me, and then it just kind of drops off, which is why this like I said, this ends abruptly. But I didn't want to not cover it because at the same time, it's still two former nuns in a suicide pact, which I don't know if people know this, if you're not terribly religious, but it's generally really frowned upon to commit suicide. That's, especially if you're Catholic, that's automatically go to hell. No, don't pass go, don't collect 200, go straight to hell. So the two nuns who would clearly know the Catholic rules
it's kind of
are we're going to commit suicide to be with God. They should know those are not the rules.
But for whatever reason, that's not uncommon.
It's not.
People do that all the time. So
yeah, it don't get me wrong. Suicide is more common than I think people realize it is, and I don't think that whatever your religious background is has a strong impact on whether you choose to do it or not.
But when you're choosing to do it specifically because you want to be with God,
it's the phrasing that catches me because it's not like they're in despair. They're like, oh, life isn't worth it anymore. They're like, no, we want to be in peace and be with God. That's not you wouldn't in your right state of mind, I think, phrase it like that, because unless they've just completely abandoned their backgrounds, that's not how they should be thinking about it. I'm in no place to judge them, but I'm just saying.
I don't know.
That's extra weird to me coming from the religious perspective.
I also hear this story and I think, wouldn't it be really cool to just okay, so it's two nuns that stop being a nun.
Yeah.
They drive around the country.
Yeah.
And they just take random jobs and do stuff.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole lot of really good stories that could come from that.
I do. I agree.
To have this be a full comprehensive story, if we could have that, would be really cool.
Yeah. So, now, am I allowed to say the part that I'm not supposed to say?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So
because we can always delete it if it's that offensive.
It's not offensive. It's not offensive at all.
Okay.
I have absolutely nothing to back up what I'm about to say, which is out of character for me. I don't normally do this.
Okay.
But I'm going to do it. when I read this story, I could not help but wonder, is this a relationship?
Oh, I feel like it is.
That's how I read it.
Yeah.
And they never say it.
No, they never say it. And when did this happen?
72.
Do you think they would say it even if they knew it was?
Not necessarily, no. But that's the thing. But that's like how I read it. Like I didn't read this as we're two former nuns who are good friends and we drive around the country. I read this as we're two nuns who realize that we like women and we're going to leave and drive around the country. And I have nothing to back that up. Absolutely nothing at all to back that up. But that's how I read it. And I, on top of the fact that these two were together and they're considered each other's family and all that, on top of that, the going to psychotherapy part, like I'm reading that again. I have nothing to back this up, but I'm like, are they in psychotherapy because they're gay?
Because they're trying to like fix them or whatever.
Yeah,
quote unquote.
Because
I want to be clear. I don't believe that, but that's what they would
right,
say.
Right. Because I'm thinking in 1972, that would be a reason. Like, I mean, there's tons of other reasons, of course. But that would be a reason that you would go, is that either you yourself or somebody else thinks you need some help. Mm-hmm. And I really wonder if that, and I would love it, like, that's never going to be known. Like, I'm not going to get that doctor's records. Not going to happen. But I would love to know that. Because I'm almost curious, like, if there really is almost nothing psychologically wrong with these women, they're just living in this society where they're told that they're wrong.
Yeah, who they are is not acceptable.
Yeah,
basically. And I think that very well could be a very strong possibility. You still have to question, though. Mm-hmm. Whenever somebody goes as far as like a ritual suicide thing, I mean, there's some sort of frustration, but it could just be the persecution that people are putting them through, because of who they are. I gotta say,
I don't normally speculate. I don't like speculating. I've made that very clear on the podcast. And then, of course, I went ahead and did it anyway. And now, I'll get a nasty email being like, "What? That was my aunt. She wasn't a lesbian." Like, okay, fine. Like, I didn't mean it. Like, if you take that as an insult, I didn't mean it as an insult. I'm just like, that's the way I read this.
Yeah, that's the way I read it. But we should be very clear that it could just be really too really close friends.
It could be. I mean, that certainly happens too.
I know that at one point in time you said like the next of kin for each of them was each other.
Yeah.
And that just screams like
that's
more than
there's
just
like so
friends.
many there's so many little hints.
Yeah.
Like leaving your job security to go off together, writing each other as next of kin, saying that the one woman's family accepts her more than her own family. I'm like, why does your own family not accept you? Maybe none of that is maybe I'm reading the whole thing wrong, but that's how I read it. And I'm like, that to me would make the story even more interesting. But we don't know. We
don't know, but I think you absolutely are correct, because now we go from having two nuns working in a hospital, quitting their job to travel the world or country.
Yeah.
Now you have two nuns that fall in love, leave their job, and travel the world, a country, because they don't fit anywhere, because people aren't accepting of who they are, which I think is just an amazing story. I
think it's a great story, and it's in the time frame here in the 1970s. That's a tragic story. But in our time now, 50 years later, this is like, I don't want to say it's romantic because, there's suicide involved, but it's like, people who found each other and like defied the odds. Like, that's cool. Like, you two were ahead of your time there. The world just didn't agree. But I could, again, maybe I'm wrong and none of this is correct. So anyway, like I said, like that's the part that I wasn't sure if I should say because I don't have the evidence to back it up. But I just can't help but read it that way.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I mean, by all means, it's possible that that's not it at all. But
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty strong possibility.
Yeah.
The other big question that goes with this is that is the hotel that this happened at, is this the hotel? And I'm not even sure if it's still there.
It's not there today, but it was there in our lifetime.
Okay, so they did tear it down, but it used to be the little motel somewhere very close to, probably like right around like, what is it, Willie's or whatever?
Sure.
The little supper club there and stuff. I think it might have been right across the street from it.
I mean, if
I don't think it's Willie's,
anybody like not from Kaukauna is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But if you're referring to a motel that was on
Double O,
Double O, then yeah, it's probably that.
Probably very close to 55.
It's
55.
It's probably that one. Yeah.
Okay.
I can't be 100% because it in here doesn't give me an address. It just gives me like a route number.
Okay.
So I can't be 100%. But it's on Highland. It's on Double O. I mean, how many Kaukauna motels are there? I don't know.
Well, that used to be 41 though. So maybe there was a lot of hotels at one point in time there.
I don't know. But I think you're probably right.
So, all right. Well, that was a short, sweet episode, but I think, and you know what I want you to know that I think you made the episode way better by throwing a little bit of speculation in there.
I know.
So
that's part that I think really makes it interesting.
I do too.
Which is why I don't normally want to do it, but this time I made an exception because I would love to. I say this a lot of times where I'm like, I'd love to have some more on this, and then I never do because I have to keep moving forward. But this is one where I really hope there's something out there that can add to it, because I think there's a deeper story here. Well, I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's there.
Yeah, like you didn't really capture probably the trauma, the sadness of this story fully because we don't know the full backstory. But I think if we knew that, this would be a very, very emotional story.
I agree. Yeah, so absolutely.
All right. Well, with that, I think we can wrap this episode up. We want to thank everybody for their continued support of this podcast, and we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode.
Yeah, and it's another suicide episode.
Wow, 2 in a row, man. Going dark here.
Yeah.
So, not Kaukauna, though, right?
No. Wait, yes.
Wait, yes?
Well, partially yes.
Okay.
Partially yes.
Headed back to the Kaukauna?
Not on purpose, partially yes.
Okay. All right, well, we will be back in 2 weeks with that one, and we'll see y'all then. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem. Join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of Murder and Mayhem.